Hello, everybody. We have an absolute corker for you today. I'm going to be interviewing Keith Scobie-Youngs. He's a distinguished horologist and conservation specialist renowned for his expertise in public and turret clocks. Keith is the founder of the Cumbria Clock Company, which is a leading name in horological conservation and responsible for maintaining and restoring over 1,400 historic clocks across the UK. Now, among many of Keith's achievements, he led the major disassembly and conservation and restoration of the Great Clock of Westminster. It's famously known as Big Ben. Now, this was one of the largest and most complex heritage clock projects in the country's history. So I'm very excited to be speaking to Keith today, and I know nothing about clocks. This is the first time we've had anybody speaking about clocks. So I really hope you enjoy today's episode. Keith, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it very much indeed.
Good, 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 good. So let's I think we'll start with your background. Let's go with your background and when you first got into everything to do with clocks.
It's quite simple really. My father was head of woodwork, metalwork, technical drawing at the local comprehensive school, and I'm one of five children, perhaps the least academic, and so my father decided that it was really important that I do something with my hands. And he had recently had somebody at his school who had been a clockmaker and went to work in Cirencester. That I was brought up in the small village of Fairford in Gloucestershire, and
I know it well. I know that
I'll do.
village well.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I did all my growing up, and I, got an interest from 14. I went to the local library. I'd get books out, and then at the age of 17, I went to Birmingham Polytechnic and took a course at the School of Silversmithing and Jewellery in the Jewellery Quarter, which is still there, on horology, the science of measurement of time, and it was a 3-year course, 5 people per year, 2 lecturers, and that's where the whole thing really started. I left
Did
there in
did
1981.
did
No,
you love
no,
it from
sorry,
the
84.
outset?
I loved it. Yeah, yeah,
Did
uh,
you?
yeah. I did. It just seemed I was very comfortable working with machines. Anyway, my father had brought me and my brother up to work on. My brother did motorbikes. I did stationary engines and bits and bobs like that. We're brought up with my father taking us to museums, showing us mechanical items. So it was just natural that I fell into the ways of working with objects such as clocks.
And what was your first job?
I think when I went to Birmingham, I think my first job at Birmingham was making tools for a clockmaker. So I remember
Oh,
making
was
a
it?
set of hand removers, collets, to make parts of watches. And the first year, you did watches and clocks. And after you messed around making those bits, you would find somebody who would lend you a clock to repair, and then you'd sit there on your bench, and the lecturer would come round, and he would take you through taking it apart, and then the skills involved in bringing that clock back to life. And that's how it really started. And the lecturers at Birmingham Polytechnic then were excellent. My head lecturer was a chap called David Evans, who had been at Hurstman Zoo in the observatory, very, very well respected clockmaker at the time. And he one thing which was really important then, he taught us to come out of that college and be commercial. So we could go to another clockmaking
Mm.
company or to a clockmaking company as what was called then an improver, and you would be a useful thing for their company, which was really important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And 'cause I thought I had a niche job. Yours is even more niche, isn't it?
Well,
Incredible.
horology is niche anyway. And
Mm.
then I decided to go one step further because in Fairford, near Fairford, was a chap who looked after the local turret clocks. And so whilst I was at college and he found out that I was studying horology, he suggested that I should come and have a look at some of the turret clocks when I went back at in my holidays. And so he started to show me these big, wonderful machines, which were a cross between a stationary engine or a traction engine, but were a clock. And all of a
Right.
sudden, it started to make sense. And then when I finished in 1984 at Birmingham, I went straight to London. And luckily enough, I managed to find a job with a company called Public Clocks of London. My governor then was Vic Adams, and he took me on, and I just went straight into turret clock restoration conservation.
And can you explain to our viewers what a turret clock is?
A turret clock is a large clock found in a tower or a big public building, which drives exterior dials of various sizes from 2 foot up to 24 foot, which is the biggest one in this country. So
Right.
they come in many shapes and forms. They strike bells of many different weights and sizes,
Yeah.
drive different numbers of dials, and they're incredibly robust, but they're also incredibly accurate and high precision machines.
Yeah.
And you know I mean, look at Big Ben now. I think the team there have got it keeping time to 100th of a second. That's not bad for something
Yeah.
which was installed in 1859.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing. And what was it like for you moving from Fairford to London? Tell me what that experience was like.
Well, I think if you know Fairford, if you can imagine Fairford in the late 70s, it was a very sleepy town, and
Mm.
to kind of move from there to Handsworth in Birmingham in 1981, just after the riots, that was a culture shock for a young country boy, and then from Birmingham to London, 1984, it was great. I was really lucky. Really, the timing was really good because Vic, my governor, had been the service manager of a very famous company called Thwaites and Reed, and they had looked after many of the clocks throughout London, including a Great Clock. And amongst his staff were kind of people who'd also been working for Thwaites and Reed. So as a young 20-year-old, I was being taught by 60-year-old men who had been taught by people within the trade going back generations. So I learned a huge amount of the traditional ways of just understanding and working within towers. And that was invaluable. You know, just they were really interesting men because horology was a trade. There was no difference between being a public clock repairer and a sparky or a plumber or a joiner. They
Mm.
wanted to go on site, do a good job, do their job well, and get to the pub at 4:30. They didn't read about clocks in the evening like I do. I'm sitting in my study here, surrounded by books. They looked at it as a trade, a way to make money, and something to be proud of. And they
Mm.
taught me a huge amount in the 6 years I was at Public Clocks, and I felt it. I was very lucky because of that. I worked with a really clever horologist called John Vernon, and John, I'm sure as we'll discuss later, was the man behind the 1977 restoration of Big Ben when it had its breakdown. And so I used to hear the stories from John about what he did in 1977. I never imagined that I would be following in his footsteps and finding a signature, 35
Mm.
or 30 odd years later. So, I mean, clocks, I suppose, link you to the past incredibly well. And, that was a wonderful experience.
Incredible. And I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like just to walk into, the base of a tower that has a huge clock, turret clock. You must have, there must be serious sort of infrastructure, and it's yes, it's a clock, but as you say, it looks more like a possibly, parts of a steam engine rather than
Yeah,
a
and
clock.
I think that's the really interesting the thing which drew me into um, turret clocks. Even though I went to London, I got a job with Vic. I initially thought I'll do this until a proper job comes along, thinking that a proper job was kind of restoring long case clocks and table clocks and
Mm.
the carriage clocks. But I soon fell in love with all the other trades and skills that are associated with being a person who works within turret clock horology, because you've got the weight and the size, you've got it's spread over a whole building. The weights will drop the length of the tower. The weights are massive. You've got to learn how to fit new lines on them. The dials are huge. You've got to learn to repair those. You've got to learn steeplejacking so you can go out on the front and take the hands off. You've got to learn about bells. You've got to learn about leverage. So even though I'd gone to Birmingham and learned all about escapement theory and wheel and pinion engagement, how a count wheel strike work, how's a rack strike work, I then had to go and see those in an expanded form, working at higher power, but still the same theory. So it was just I suppose if you want to be crude about it, it's the agricultural side of horology, but you still got that precision that's required.
Yeah, and it's there's so much to learn. It must have been in the early days. You must have felt quite just when you went to your first few jobs, you must have thought, "Ha, there's lots I've got to learn."
But I would be with one of these older men who would kind of treat me initially like a dog's body. I'd be running up and down the towers, going to get bits and bobs. They'd be playing pranks on me. They would be doing all sorts of things. But as soon as I proved my worth, I suppose nowadays you would call it bullying in the workplace. Other people might have a different view of that. But they were the type of men that if you proved your worth, then they would respect that. And I think, I'd come out of Birmingham with relatively good qualifications. And so I knew my theory of horology. And then when I started to be able to apply it, and they realized I wasn't just sitting there just to earn a bit of cash, I was really into these things. They helped me learn. And I was only working for 6 years in that environment, which is a very short period of time before myself and Lynn, my wife, who I met in London, decided to head off up into Cumbria at the age of 25 years old to set up the Cumbria Clock Company. So in a way, it shows the how good those men were. I worked because they taught me so much in such a short period of time.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's very early, isn't it? I think I was a similar age actually when I formed my business. I could have stayed for many years working, but I decided to branch out on my own, and a lot of it was self-taught.
Yes, I suppose that let's be honest. At the age of 25, I did think I was the best turret clock maker that walked the planet, and I knew everything. It was just I know how to do that. The learning curve was like that, and that was quite scary in its own right. That all of a sudden we'd kind of swap Camden Town for the kind of just a small village of Greystoke, just outside Penrith, and kind of gone on this journey of setting up a workshop and trying to make a living from it. A lot of our friends down in Camden and North London work over. Keith and Lynn will be back within 6 months.
Yeah.
But 36 years later, we're still kind of hanging around up here.
How much actual making of parts is involved? So, do you need to be very proficient with tooling and on lathes and that type of thing? What's involved in that side?
I was very lucky, again, because of my father bringing us up as, being head of metalwork at the local comprehensive school. Obviously, I was privileged to be able to use the machines and the tooling, and being taught to file correctly, taught to use all the tools correctly. And so it was second nature. And that, in a way, helped when I went to the Birmingham Polytechnic, because I didn't have to learn anything about machining or making. I just had to learn horology. I knew how to cut brass, cut steel. And when we set up the company, I think, again, I was incredibly aware of the fact that, we needed to make parts. And I really enjoyed that part of it, because there are no blueprints for the parts. You have to look at what you've got and copy it, or if that bit's missing, you've got to work out what that bit would be. And that's where the challenge is. And you have limited tools when you first start. I mean, now we've got a massively kind of brilliant workshop with loads of machines in there which do all different processes. But initially, I mean, you know, when people made turret clocks in 1760, they're very basic machines. You know, they didn't have the machines I've got in my workshop now.
No.
And so, you know, if they could do what they did, I felt that I'd be able to do it as well. And, you know, there's lots of lessons to learn on the way with that. And I kind of now, even now to this day, we have a comprehensive workshop where we do everything in-house. We subcontract some CNCing for some of the products that we make, but all the restoration conservation work, every object, every part, everything from welding to machining to milling to everything is done in-house.
Yeah.
And
Incredible.
that's what you know, the people I employ love about it. There's a huge amount of pride when you make a part for a clock, be it a turret clock or a domestic clock, you put it into that machine and it works again. I mean, that is a real feel-good factor, which I think, unfortunately, a lot of young people miss out on nowadays.
And what sort of, if you go back over the last 20, 30 years of your career, what dates are we looking at? You said to the 1750s, then the 1850s for Big Ben. Is it between? Is that sort of 100 years? Is it, or is it earlier? I mean, when are sort of turret clocks really becoming really fashionable? Is it in the Victorian sort of industrial revolution, and
Well,
that's
no, I
being
mean,
thrown up all over the place?
we're really lucky. We look after the clock at Salisbury Cathedral, 1386. We do the Wells
Amazing.
Cathedral clock, which is now in the Science Museum, in the entrance of the Science Museum, which is a wonderful machine and easy to see. We took that from the dusty horological section on the second floor and brought it down to the entrance, a machine made in 1393, and got it working, rehung the bells, rehung the weights. And it's one of the main, you see loads of people standing in front of this colossal machine ticking away. So we work on clocks from that period all the way up to the electromechanical stuff of, say, the Royal Liver Building, which is one of ours, driving the country's largest dials of 1911, and then even further into the electromechanical world of the 1960s, when you know, before people started using electronics. That's where I kind of get a little bit lost in the world of early electronics. We now produce modern clock systems where, you know, on the occasion where they're needed, but 99% of our work is conservation and restoration of existing clock systems.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
And
they'll outlast any new clock. You know, you put
incredible.
a master clock in there, it's electronics. How often do you change your television set? 15, 20 years, perhaps even before then. I mean, turret clocks we just had one in the workshop, which is literally 300 years old this year. And, you know, we got it back. We restored it. It's a wonderful machine. And it's now keeping time to within a few seconds a week.
Yeah,
That's what
amazing.
the thing about it is.
And it must, you know, constantly just blow your mind when you're working on a clock and you think they made this in 1300 or 1400, and the conditions that they were working under, they were limited in what they had tooling wise, and it must be very humbling a lot of the time when you see the craftsmanship that was back then.
So you look at, if you look at the clocks of Salisbury, Wells, and Rye, which are the three ancient clocks of Britain, the ironwork in those machines is like joinery in iron. It is so precise. You have to experience taking these things apart. They come apart like a flat pack set of bits. You put them together. There's no nuts or bolts. There's wedges. And you put it back together. You put these wedges back in, and the thing goes perfectly square and solid. The teeth are cut by hand. You can still see how they were marked out. But they were clever people. They understood the difference in the irons, that ones which had higher carbon, which would be good for making files and tools to shape the wrought iron. They're incredibly skilled in blacksmithing. They understood their materials. Time wasn't an issue. And all you need really is a set of dividers, a hacksaw and a file, and you can be incredibly accurate in what you make, incredibly precise. I mean, there are people out there. My father was one who could file to a brilliant degree of accuracy. You put a wheel between two centers and spin it and work on it from that. You're going to get it as round as people get now on a CNC machine lathe. It's the intellect of these people is exactly the same as us, perhaps even better, you could argue. They just didn't have the stuff around them that we have now. And a kind of a thing I always tell a story about when I was in early days of the Cumbria Clock Company. I went to have a look at a job, and it was one of the biggest jobs we could do. And I kind of went there and I looked at it at the time. It was taking down some dials, restoring a movement. And I came back thinking, it's a bit too big for us, a bit too big job for me. I can't do that. And I remember phoning my father and saying, I went to have a look at this job, but I don't think I can do it, and blah, blah, blah. And he turned around to me and he said, well, it's good to know your limits, Keith. It's that sensible. You're not going to let anybody down. But he said, I'll ask you one question. He said, when was that clock installed? And I said, about 17 something or other. He goes, oh, that's interesting. So the bloke who installed that clock was obviously a very good clockmaker, because he did that back in 1790 or whatever. I said, yeah, he was, Dad. He says, well, therefore he must have been a lot better than you then. And that was just the blue touch paper, which made me realise, come on, Keith, pull your finger out. If you want to be good, you've got to take on these challenges. And I think then when you start to realise that, and you're following a craftsman of 250 years before you, you really do get an appreciation of the skills that they had. And another one, a local clockmaker here used to say to me, well, Keith, if you're working on a clock, imagine the original clockmaker behind you. And if he's smiling, carry on. If he's not, sling your hook.
Yeah.
And I think that is stuck with me. Those type of, respecting the people who went before you in these jobs. And that's all you become. In another 100 years, there's going to be another form of another company who's going to be taking Big Ben out of that tower. And we're just part of the story, and they will be top dog at the time.
Yeah, there's a question whether they're going to be quite as good.
Well, actually, this is where the conservation, as a general thing, have a very important job to do, and that's to make sure we keep those skills alive. Because Big Ben will go 1,000 years. The only reason which will stop Big Ben going 1,000 years is that we lose the skill set to do it.
Yeah, incredible.
And that's the importance of people like you and me to make sure that those skills stay alive.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So going back to your, you set your the Cumbria Clock Company up, and what was it like getting the first lot of business in, and was it a challenge? Did you get lots of work straight away, or did it just take time to build up a reputation?
It took time to build a reputation. Lynn and myself didn't have a plan B. That was one of the problems we had. We only had plan A, and that was the kind of, being 25 and whatever. And so when we got to we realised we had to make money. Lynn had gone off and done a sign writing course so she could do all the dial restorations and gilding, etc., and marking out, which she was very good at. And I was a clockmaker, but getting the work in was really hard. So Lynn ended up delivering pies, cleaning caravans, anything to make a bit of extra money. Because I used to do steeplejacking, I'd go and paint anything at height, take anything down at height to make money, to keep us going until we got that one or two jobs, or that, started to get service contracts, and then word of mouth followed. I mean, in 1990 when we set up, there was no internet. There was no. The only way we could, before we left London, Lynn would go to the Guildhall, get the Kelly's directories of the northern counties, look through the villages, find the village where it said has church clock, and make a note of that village, and then
love this.
we would then go and get the DAC Dyson directory, find that village in that Dyson directory, and write a letter to the PCC secretary and the vicar. So it was really that's how we started the Cumbria Clock
I
Company.
love it. I love it. I mean, it just reminds me of my early days. That's that type of, how you market yourself and how you're going to get the work in. I mean, that's what you had to do, isn't it? That type of thing.
It is. And I used to go and do talks around the different horological groups throughout the UK, just saying, look, we're the Cumbria Clock Company. We've actually restored so many clocks. My governor Vic had, I'd worked on some really prestigious stuff with him, and he kindly let me use those as examples of work I'd done.
No, yeah, that was nice.
So because one of the reasons we ended up in Cumbria is that Lynn and myself didn't want to stand on my governor's toes. I didn't want to step on Vic's toes, so we made sure that we were way out of his catchment area, and he really appreciated that, and we stayed in contact up until his death, 5 years ago, where I spoke at his funeral. So we had a good relationship.
Oh, that's lovely. I get really cross when I speak to some youngsters, and they're not promoting themselves, and they're not going out there and finding the work. I say to them, my God, we didn't have the internet then. We didn't have a luxury of having a website. You'd have to carry around, your sort of Kodak pouch of photographs, and go to your customers and go through the photographs.
Look at this.
This is what we've done, and then put it in a sketchbook or something like that, and that's how you used to do it. And I speak to some youngsters now that are trying to sort of set up, and I say, "How's your website going?" I don't have a website yet. I'm thinking, crikey, come on.
That's your window. That's your shop window.
Exactly. It's so much easier. It's so easy now to promote yourself. It's easier than it's ever been to promote yourself.
But at the same time, I thankfully I'm involved with the Antiquarian Horological Society, the AHS, which is the chairman James Nye and the committee are really into putting on really good events at St Mary's at the Hill in London. They do the series of London lectures, and they encourage students from West End, Birmingham, young horologists to come to those lectures and learn a little bit about horology through the lecture, but really importantly to network, because everybody's there. They can read about these people in the magazines and the journals, but they can actually stand there and talk to them. And I think that's really, really important. The whole networking thing, face to face, with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or a biscuit or whatever, having a chat with those people, networking and saying, "Look, here I am. I'm 26 years old and I want to start. I'm just starting work. What do I do?" And that's we need to encourage them to do that.
Yeah, and that's so important, because you can be absolutely brilliant at your trade, but if you can't communicate and speak to somebody and look them in the eye and have a good conversation, you're not going to get much work.
No. And at the end of the day, that's why we're in it. We're in it to enjoy a living working with your hands, and secondly to make a living. You have to make a living. You have to make a living.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are not, people have to believe in you, don't they? So therefore, if you can't demonstrate that you're competent and you'll be able to do that project with a good conversation, degree of expertise, you're not going to get work. So that's one side they sort of don't teach at college, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very, very much so. Yes.
And
as your business grows, employing people is a whole new ball game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what out of interest, what has that been like for you? Did you say how many? Did you say you have now?
28, including some subcontractors that we have.
Wow.
So I think at the moment we have either 24 or 25 on the books and about 4 regular subcontractors.
Go
So
on then. Now give me.
when we started, when Lynn and myself started, there's a couple of things we knew we'd have to do if we were going to be successful in what we wanted to do. And that was one, not to be frightened of employing people. That was one. We knew the only way you could grow anything was to employ people. And secondly, to manufacture products. We had to have products that we had control over. And so that was really important. So those are the two things that we drove forward. We also knew we wanted to be in conservation, not the manufacture of new turret clocks. We didn't want to make synchronous electric drives or stuff like that. Our passion was in conservation restoration. So those are the 3 things that we went out and about to do.
Okay, so explain about the products then. What products were you making?
So with a turret clock, one of the main problems was getting people to wind them weekly. You know, it started to become a thing in the 1960s. And so a lot of the turret clocks were being taken out and a synchronous electric motor fitted, even before the 60s and the 50s and perhaps the 60s. Then there was a group of antiquarian horologists who realized that we were losing a huge part of our horological heritage. And through an organization within the church, they made it impossible to replace a turret clock with a synchronous electric movement, and that you had to fit what was called automatic winding. So that was a device that you could fit to the clock movement without altering it anyway, which would take away the chore of winding the clock. And the bigger companies came up with their versions of those, and they were really good systems. So we had to make our own automatic winding unit. So we designed an automatic winding unit, and then we had to get that onto the market, and we had to sell it nearly at cost, because the only way we could beat these people was to have a unit cheaper than them, but better than what they were doing. So I set out to make it and design a winding unit that would outlast my competitors' winding units, and also last as long as possible, as long as the clock mechanism itself. So we still give a basic 10-year guarantee straight away, covering everything on our winding units. And they became very popular. Now we sell them all over the world. We've made over 3,500 of them, and we're really proud of those. And then the night silencing systems, auto regulators, then all the things like pulleys and hammers and all bell cranks, all these things which have to be made, which the old Victorian companies used to make, and now we have to follow them.
Incredible. Oh, I love that. And tell me a bit about your journey of employing people. What's that been like?
It's been great. I think it's I've thoroughly enjoyed that part, to be honest with you. I mean, the first person I employed was a chap called Dave McVicker. He was 10 years older than me. He was a shepherd in Cumbria, but used to restore motorbikes, and he didn't like being a shepherd much more. And he came round, so we went to the pub. I brought him a bacon sandwich and a pint. And I said, "Do you fancy coming to work for me?" And he came and worked for me, and he worked for me for like 30 years. He retired at COVID, which was really, really sad. And he was brilliant. And, then we just started I employed a machinist who kind of helped me doing the machine work. And then we started to get young horologists. Peter, my nephew, joined us. He's still with us. We had a chap called Ian who ended up working for Parliament at Big Ben. We then had Mark who joined us. He's still been with us. And then we had our first apprentice, Dan, who's still with us. And it's just grown and grown and grown. And I think, we wanted to have, Lynn and myself realized that the most important asset to a company is the people who work for you. So if you make their life enjoyable and you treat them fairly, then they will do a decent job for you. And that's what we've done. And we've just built a company now with all these people. Out of the 24 on the cards, 10 of those are below the age of 28 years old.
Crikey,
So,
that's
yeah.
good.
And as I was pointing out to Mark, who's now the ripe old age of 47, I said, you're one of the oldest now. And so we're quite a young company. And, but there's that enthusiasm to learn. And I think it's just with employing people, there's lots of different ways. A lot of it depends on the type of person you employ. And by being in conservation, you attract a certain type of person.
Yeah.
And that is just being fair. I think Lynn and myself always had another thing we used to say was that we always want to have a company where we would like to go and work for Keith and Lynn. And that was the important thing. In the 36 years we've been going, I've had to say goodbye to 5 people in that time, which isn't a lot.
No, not a lot at all. And it's a fine line though, is that, when I was setting up my business, I would, for years I'd be paying people more than I'd be earning, because you're desperately trying to build up a reputation and a brand, aren't you? You're constantly because that is going to be more valuable to you in the long term, rather than taking the same wages as John or Mike or Sue.
One thing I found really interesting is a stage where people who were working for me could get a mortgage because they had a full-time job, but I couldn't get one because I'm self-employed.
No.
You tell me what that's all about.
That's very wrong.
Yeah, but it was very true. There are people working for me getting mortgages, and I'm thinking, I can't get one. I don't earn enough, and I'm self-employed, but they're employed.
Yeah, I know.
Self-employed.
I used to get really jealous in the early days. I'm thinking, oh my God, they get a weekly wage every single week. They get a weekly wage. I was so jealous.
Yes.
I've never known anything different. I've been self-employed since I was 21. So, it's always been the case for me. But it is interesting as well. It's just a lot of people don't realise that when you're setting up a business, especially businesses like yours and mine, it's incredibly niche. You're as good as your last job. Your reputation is as good as your last job. So to build this, it's you do have to take on certain things that are risky. You've got to keep pushing yourself and get it out of your comfort zone, because you're never going to go forward if you don't get out of your comfort zone. So you might have to take on projects where it's a little bit of a lost leader, and you're thinking, crikey, I'm not going to earn much out of this. However, it's good for the portfolio. A lot of people don't understand that. You have to do that if you want to build a long-term, reputable business.
We recently did a pneumatic carillon, really made in the 1930s. It's this kind of compressed air going through a wind chest, which pulls down hammers and plays tunes from a little machine which got pens on it. I've always wanted to do one, never done one. Keith Cotton, who works for me, who's worked for Joyce and Whitchurch before joining me, always in clock. He'd never done one, and so we decided, right, let's price this job. So we priced the job together because we'd never done one. We were miles out. We're absolute miles out. It took us like 3 times as long, and this only happened a year ago. We're experienced people, and I loved it, and it's worked, and it looks fantastic, and I don't really care, because I learned so much. I decided to push myself out of that comfort zone. And now, if anybody comes to us, 1, we've got it in the portfolio, and 2, I can put a price together and say, that's the price. And I'm 100% sure that's the price, because I've done one. If anybody else is tendering, if they're a third of my price, I tell you what, they've got it wrong.
Yes. And
it's about pushing yourself. If they laugh at the company, because they just say Keith doesn't know that word no. So somebody will phone up and say, can you do these dog track signs from White City dog track put on display? And I just go, yes. And we get them in. They go, what are we going to do, Keith? I said, well, let's find out. We'll make them work.
Yeah.
You know, it's a challenge, isn't it? You know,
Let's get onto YouTube, lads, and have a look.
yes. Oh, look, there's nothing, but hey, we can. But it's about challenging yourself, and I think if you're the type of conservator restorer who's willing to challenge, but have enough sense up there that you're not going to do something which is going to damage the object irreversibly,
Yeah.
then you know that you've got to push yourself. You've got to push the industry. You've got to inspire the people working with you. The fact that and you can do it if you really try to do it. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's also nice to, win one of these very prestigious, historically significant projects. And what I love about it, Keith, is that when I'm working on one of these projects, we've just won it. I really feel that it's in safe hands. I love the responsibility.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
love. I'm in charge of this project, and you, Mr. Building, you're in safe hands here because we're going to do exactly what's right
Yeah.
for you,
Yes.
and that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to me talking about you become part of that building's history and part of its story. It will live on way
Yeah,
past you,
yeah.
and you have a certain duty and responsibility to do that, to make sure that building continues. In the same way, I have that responsibility with a clock.
No, absolutely. So, in 2017, if I'm correct, your team undertook the monumental task
Yeah.
of restoring Big Ben's clock mechanism. Now, how did that come about, and what was that like? To take us through those first stages.
I think I got asked to go in before then to do an assessment on the clock. There's some we in 2007 we'd made a temporary drive unit up there, so they have a very good clock team at the palace, who look after it day to day, and all the other clocks in the within the palace, and they needed to do some work on the striking train. This is in 2007, and the going train, and so they needed a temporary drive unit to fit in the tower so they could keep the dial saying the right time whilst they're undertaking this work. So I went along and designed a synchronous drive which could fit, clamp up out the way, look really good, and drive those dials for a 10-week period. And we did that. I couldn't watch news at 10 for 10 weeks because I was just dreading it going backwards or something. But
Yeah.
and then I got over that fear. We did it, and obviously we kind of had a good reputation with the people at Big Ben. When it starts to play up, they called me in, and again I met up with the clock team, and we went through what was wrong, and it became evident that the problems were in what we call the dial motion works, which is the gearing, the 12-to-1 gearing behind the dials, which give the ratio between the hour and minute hand. And so those hands were going to have to come off, which would mean a scaffold. And the government then realised that if they're going to scaffold the tower, they might as well do a proper job on the whole thing. There was no point in mucking about. And so this gave them an opportunity to do everything, modernise the tower, put in a lift, put in new safety fire alarm systems, overhaul the whole thing. It's future-proofing it better than it's ever done for over the last 160 years. So the clock project was obviously included in that. And when you go up the tower, the room is quite small. It is a clock tower. And as I mentioned before, the clock is a precision instrument, so it needed to come out. So going back before I kind of get into that side of it, I didn't hear anything for a while. Then one day I was walking to work, and from my house here to my workshops, a 3-mile walk across the Lake District to the workshops through lovely views. And so I was walking my dogs to work, and I got a phone call from a chap, and he said, would you be interested in talking to me about a large clock project in central London? And I kind of thought, I might know what this is. I said, yes. He goes, well, before I can discuss it, he said, when you get to your office, there will be an NDI to sign. Will you sign
Yeah.
that and send it back to me, and I'll ring you back? So I kind of got to my office extra quick. The dogs have never had such a short walk. And, there's the NDI. I signed it, faxed it back, and it was a chap called Michael Coleman from Sir Robert McAlpine. And he said to me, a friend of mine is the chap who restored SS Great Britain in Bristol. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I should do. He said he had done your icon accreditation interview, and he'd come around your workshops, been really impressed. And he said to me, get in contact with Keith. So I went down to London, did an interview with Sir Robert McAlpine, who were one of the 3 people tendering for the tower project. And he said, look, okay, Keith, do you mind if I put you into the tender process? I'm going to sit there and say, we're going to employ a clockmaker who's a consultant to help us understand how we go about this project. And I said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. And again, I didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden, Sir Robert McAlpine were granted the contract, and I was brought in as a consultant to kind of help Sir Robert McAlpine's staff understand what it would be like working with with a clock mechanism and a Palace clock team, who I knew well. Then it kind of snowballed from there, really. Part of the contract was they had to have a dial showing the correct time all the time. But that meant, but they wanted to take the whole clock mechanism out. So that meant we'd have to make a temporary electric drive unit which could sit behind the dials and a replica set of hands. So we made 2 sets of replica hands and 2 of these drive units. We then also, they needed the clock to strike the hours for Remembrance Sunday and for New Year's Eve. So we had to make this big tolling unit to be able to lift and strike the 13.5-ton bell and its half-ton hammer. So we made that. And, that was it, really. I thought, well, I'm happy with that side of the contract. Thank you very much. Brilliant. And it was the Palace Clock team who were going to do the restoration of the clock movement. But all of a sudden, where they thought they were going to be able to do that kind of wasn't going to be available to them. So the only way was to find somewhere to restore the movement. And so they asked us whether we would supply the workshop and the help to work with the Palace Clock team to do the conservation of Big Ben. So I had to think about that for a nanosecond, and we said yes. And then one of the best journeys in turret clock horology began.
Oh,
that was incredible. And
it's incredible. Now, right, sorry, that was a lot to take in. Now, did you at any point, as this was unfolding, feel, this is, yes, I'd love to do it, but this is an awful lot. Do I have the resource? Do I have the space? Did you question that?
No, not at all. I kind of felt this. What we just talked about, to be honest with you, Vince, is exactly that feeling of like, nobody gets these opportunities in life. You've been chosen to have this opportunity. You're going to do it, whatever, hell and high water. You're going to be able to do this. And so there was a huge amount of responsibility. I'm aware of that, but I definitely didn't feel that. I didn't have sleepless nights straight away. Later, but I had that belief in my abilities. I had a belief in the team. I knew I'd got up in Cumbria that we could nail that with the Palace Clock team as well. And I never really questioned it. And we have got a really good workshop, and I had when I first moved up to Cumbria, we kind of went to Threlkeld. Then I brought a very small workshop in the village of Dacre, where we are now, and then I moved from that workshop to the bigger workshops by the castle. But I kept this 1,200 square foot workshop, which I piled all my junk in. And so when we got the Big Ben contract, I literally emptied that, restored the workshop, and we made that the Big Ben workshop. So we had 1,200 square feet of workshop to just do the basic stuff. We had storage in the main workshop. We put containers inside the barn, which were fully alarmed. And so we stored all the parts in there. And we just went through the whole conservation process as you would with kind of Fairford parish church clock, which is a 7 clock, but an eighth of the size. And everybody brought into this. I mean, it was great because we had to photograph every single part of the clock. So a chap who I've known since the age of 13 is a very, very talented clockmaker, Simon Camper from Lumen Photography. And he was employed to photograph every stage of the conservation process. We then made a full set of engineering drawings of every component of the clock. And my brother, who's talented in that department, he worked with us to produce that full set of drawings, which allowed us to make a full set of renders. And then everything started to, everybody in the workshop, every single person who'd worked for the Cumbria Clock Company while we had that clock, did something on the mechanism. I made sure that was the case. But one thing I wanted with continuity was myself and Mark, who I mentioned earlier, Mark Crangle, were the team which worked on site. You needed that continuity. And so we stripped the whole thing out. Then the team restored, did all the restoration works. I was involved in that from just advising. My team did that with the Palace Clock team. And then when it all went back to site, me and Mark installed it back, working with them. And then other people from Cumbria Clock Company would come and assist us at the set points. And, it just worked.
Okay, so I've got two questions. One, did you worry about the pricing? You don't have to answer this, but you've never had a Big Ben to work on before. So obviously you could look at Fairford Church and say, okay, it's 8 times the size, and then base it on that. But how on earth did you work it out that this wasn't just going to be a labour of love?
No, I mean the contract was set in a way that it was divided in a way where there were certain points where we could say, look, we can work to this, we can work to that, we can work to that, and as it grew, they would accommodate that. They knew our hourly rate. We were working with the Palace Clock team. They knew the hours that were involved in it because the Palace Clock team were there. So it was a very fluid but very controlled. It wasn't something I could get out of hand of and just start banging in hours and rates. It was very controlled, and there were certain sections as we went on where I felt confident to say, I know how long that bit of work's going to take, so I'm going to give you that price for that.
Okay. So that was good then. It was controlled because that's the sort of thing that could keep you up at night.
Precisely, and I think the last thing anybody wants with a contract such as Big Ben is that the contractor going bust.
Yeah.
So there had to be a complete understanding and trust between everybody, and they delivered that. I had a great project manager in Charlotte Clawton who ended up going to Westminster Abbey and has just moved on from there. There are other people, Renata, Paul Mead, Sir Robert McAlpine. It really did feel like it was a team effort. The main project manager from Sir Robert McAlpine, Nick Sturge, loads of people who understood the importance of getting that clock done and across the line and everybody staying happy. And I did really feel like I think it was because it's Big Ben. It is the icon of our nation. The mechanism is the heartbeat of our nation. And I think everybody just wanted to do the best job they could. It was a great feeling working there.
And when was the last time it had been taken apart like this?
It had never been taken out of the tower. It had never been taken out.
Never been taken out of the tower.
So
That's incredible.
so when it was the Dents finished it in their workshops at Somerset Wharf, which is just behind the Savoy Hotel as we know it now. That little area, there was a wharf there, and that's where Dent's workshop was. They finished that clock mechanism in 1853, and Edward Dent, who ran Dent, died in 1853. So he saw the clock completed in his workshop. His stepson, Frederick Dent, then installed the clock in 1859 and died in 1860, but he saw the clock installed in the tower in 1859. From then, it was 1859, I think it was 50 years later, 1909, that they did a major overhaul of the mechanism. And at the time, Dent made the kind of electric winding system, which we perhaps will discuss later, and installed that. Then there's another overhaul in 1932 and another one in 1980, a smaller one, much smaller one. They're all done on site, just dismantling it in the clock room. Then in 1976, there was a huge breakdown. There was a fault in the big fly fans which control the quarter train speed, and it meant that the weight plummeted. It threw the quarter barrel, which plays the famous Westminster chimes, up into the air and across the room. That weighed 780 kilos or something in that region, and threw it across the room. It was completely destroyed. And this is where that chap John Vernon, who I worked with,
Right,
came in from Thwaites and Reed. My governor Vic was the first one up there. He went up there because they got the phone call and they thought a bomb had gone off, but that was obviously it hadn't. He got there, I can't remember what, about 4 o'clock in the morning. John Vernon got there. He got a bottle jack out. He jacked up the frame. He got the escapement, a very delicate part of the clock out, the museum at the below, put that in, and he got the clock up and running within 6 hours. But the quarter train was smashed to pieces. And within a year, the Clerk of Works then said how important it was to repair this clock. There was people wanting to replace it with an electric clock back then, but he said, no, this is an important heritage item. And John Vernon, within a year, remade all the parts he needed to do for the quarter train, fitted them back into place, and got the clock chiming and for the Queen's Silver Jubilee. And so you know, that was the only other time some of the items had been taken out, but we were the first ever. We removed everything. We removed all the hammers around the bells, removed the hands, the dial motion works, the clock mechanism, just leaving the frame, the clock frame in place, and we took the clock weights and pulleys, everything out of the tower.
It's incredible. And I've got a couple of other questions. One, what faults did you find with the clock when you took it all apart? What sort of faults did you find that you may necessarily not have expected? Any wear and tear and that type of thing?
The wear and tear we found in the dial motion works, which we knew was in there, that was fine.
Okay.
I knew that was there. We knew how to deal with that. We made a plan for it. We came up with a way to deal with that, and that was what we're expecting. In the mechanism itself, it was so well made in 1853 that it and it had been perhaps one of the most pampered clocks, that there were just minor running repairs needed doing to it and tidying up repairs, because all the clockmakers beforehand would have to get it up and running really, really quickly. You know, downtime of Big Ben. So the repairs weren't done as well as you would expect, but I refuse to criticize them for it, because they were constrained by time. And so they had to get it up, so they had to do a quick repair. We were able to tidy those up and make them more secure. There was a couple of a worn pinion, which we took the opportunity to make a new one. We made some bevel gears on the fly fan drive because they weren't correct. The rest was polishing pivots, minor rebushings, nothing you wouldn't expect to find in a clock of that age. So it was one of the hardest parts was the cleaning and the conserving, working out the best cleaning methods to use and the best methods to protect. And because these parts are heavy, they're the heaviest clock I've ever had through the workshops to do. Yeah. So you had to have all of that to deal with.
Oh, could you give us the approximate dimensions of the hands and the weight, so of the big hand?
So they weren't as heavy as people think. I mean, the minute hand is 14 foot long, and a relatively easy 2-man lift.
Is it?
Yeah, it's like something like, I don't know, 86 kilos, something like that. Not too heavy.
And is it cast?
So the whole story about Big Ben and the hands, I mean, we could go on forever, but these are the third set of hands. The original hands were made from cast iron and were far too heavy. So then they then replaced them with cast bronze hands, which were okay-ish, but the minute hand was still too much mass when it ticked, and that was being transferred to the clock mover and causing problems. So they what they did was cut the long bit of the minute hand off, which was made from cast bronze, and replace that with a copper tube like the wing of an aeroplane. And they put that on, which reduced the mass and the momentum in the hands. And that's what we've got now. So the minute hand, 80 odd kilos, and the hour hand is still the original cast bronze hand, perhaps knocks in at around 110 kilos. So not massive.
No.
And when you're doing your tour of London, you get certain people say they weigh 300 kilos. No,
they don't.
It's
funny.
If you add the counterweights on the inside, then you start to get up to some big weights. But the hands themselves don't.
But that must make a big impact. If you're altering the weights of the hands, that's going to affect the mechanism, isn't it?
Well, you've got to have the hands. The hands have to be balanced. The hands have to be balanced, and because if a hand is down at 6 o'clock and it's not balanced, it's going to take a lot of energy to bring it up round here. And when it goes past 12 o'clock, it's going to be flying.
It's going to. Exactly.
So you have to balance the hands to make any clock work, not Big Ben, but any clock. You have to have balanced hands. So on the inside, you have this hand on the outside. On the inside, you've got big weights on the opposite side of the hand to balance the hand.
Yes, of course.
And so I think the numbers being quoted by some people in London about the weight of the hands are including those counterweights.
Right. Get it.
So when the hands, actually the temporary hands I made were 3 times heavier than the original hands because I had to fit my counterweights on the outside of the hand. I didn't have the advantage of having counterweights on the inside, which meant I only had a small area on the other side of the hand to operate in, whereas on the inside they can have an arm hanging down with a weight on, so you got more leverage. So our hands were heavier, but they had to be balanced. And
were they cut? Were they cast?
No, I fabricated those. Fabricated them from steel. And there's the one set are, funny enough, in display at the School of Jewellery and Silversmithing at Birmingham City University, which used to be the Polytechnic I went to. So they got
lovely.
So they're just on display there at this moment in time. And the other set they've got at the Palace of Westminster, ready to, I think they've got plans for those. So,
So it was relatively then, it was, could I be as bold to say that it was relatively straightforward in the workshop, working on those parts, working on the repairs that the previous horologists had to do in a very speedy fashion for obvious reasons. So,
I
what
would
were there
call it.
any challenges?
Well, yeah, there were challenges. The challenges are over. The any clock that you bring in has challenges in how you hold and machine and how you make those parts. So
Hmm.
even though there were no surprises, there were
Okay.
challenges over being able to work on a clock that size. And at the end of the day, it's no different from Fairford Parish Church. It really isn't, because it's a quarter chiming clock. The really big challenge, the biggest challenge I've perhaps had in my career, was the electric winding system that was made by Dents first suggested by Dents in 1909. And that was really early for a winding system. So what you've got to realize is Big Ben has to be wound 3 times a week. And it used to take 2 men a day to wind the clock. And
Did it?
so
Amazing.
they'd put the winding handle on, and they would have to turn that winding handle 150 times to put 1 lash on the barrel of the weight line. There are 62 lashes on that. So that meant you had to wind that handle 7,500 times. But at the same time, every quarter, the weight was dropping. So it would drop, and then they'd have to wind it up again past that stage and keep going. Same with the hour strike. Right? One of the best discoveries we made, Mark found it actually, we were working under the clock and we shone the light across the floor. And he said, look at that. And there was wear marks in the floor of the clock room of the men's boots, which... And I've got a fantastic photograph, which is wonderfully showing that, of where the wear marks are in the ground. You put your feet in those, you put your hands on the handle. It is the most natural position for winding the clock. And that was an incredible find to me.
And what's the floor made of, out of interest?
Sandstone slabs.
Sandstone. Oh,
I most likely got that wrong. It could be limestone, so I
but it's
apologise for any
soft.
stone. It's stone.
Yeah, it's soft. It's soft as well, isn't it? It's soft, so therefore it will wear.
Yeah, and you've just got these wonderful footprints. And not only one, you've got the one where when it was striking the quarter, you could see how the man put his foot back to rest while he was watching the quarter train work.
Oh, that's incredible! And nobody had seen this before. Nobody had
Because the
mentioned it.
floor had been covered with a lino sometime in the 30s.
What a lovely find.
One of the best we found. And I mean, it happened that we were working on the floor. We had, site lighting, the kind of 110 volt lighting, and we had a tube, and we just had that tube lying on the floor beside us. And Mark just with the raking light across there, Mark just happened to see these worn footprints.
How incredible!
So obviously what happened, that was a chore. That was a big chore, and Dent had to pay for that. It was part of their contract. And so in 1909, they went to the government and said, we will make you a electric winding system, which we will do free of charge if you give us a 20-year contract. And the government thought about that and said, yeah, okay. So Dents went and designed this system, because you had to have an electric motor which would run and then disengage just before the quarters sounded, because you can't be winding the weight up as the quarters are wanting to sound, then re-engaged after it played the quarters. And the same with the hour strike, and then engage and wind the going train, but at the same time apply maintaining power so the clock could still tick, because otherwise the clock would stop because you're winding the weight up. So it took them 4 years to design this. So they floated the idea in 1909. They completed it in 1914. And it's amazing, absolutely amazing. This one motor, 3 clutches, and cam operated dog clutches working off a set of 6 cams on the clock, on this machine underneath the clock. And it worked absolutely fine. But the person is designed by a chap called Buckley, who was one of the foremen at Dent's who made the clock. And I think when he died, people lost the knowledge of how this machine worked. And slowly over about 1960, it started to not be automatic on its changeover. And then people then started to just wind a going train by hand, because that was relatively straightforward. And then they would just use the motorized system and index everything round by hand, to make sure it did it at the right times, and switch the motor on and off and whatever, but use the motor to wind it up. And this is how it continued to operate up until 2017. And so we said, right, we'll get this working properly. And when we took it out, we got it all out. The parts of the going train have been, the winding system with the going train, have been removed and stored in the room behind. And we got all those together, and we took them back to the workshop, and we then built a frame inside the workshop so we could replicate how it sat underneath the clock mechanism. And we then started to test it. We then started to understand how it all worked. We removed all the bits of lead people had added because they didn't quite understand how it worked. And we started to kind of think, oh yeah, it's a clutch which disengages and re-engages, and then the momentum in the barrel winds up this spring, which then throws everything forward in a like a Remington. But we had a part missing. There was a part which I knew. I was pretty sure it's for the going train. I was pretty sure that I knew what it was, but I thought, well, I'll give Parliament a ring. And I said, you keep everything, don't you? And they go, yep. We have a storage department. I said, have you got all the bits from Big Ben still? Yep, got all of those. They said, they're in storage at our storage place in West London. So I said, can we gain access? He said, yep, no problem at all. There's 6 boxes that you need to look in. So I went there with one of the clock team, Hugh Smith, who's still at the Palace. And it was like, went into this room, and it was like something out of the Indiana Jones film. It was just these big kind of, like where they kind of go fight the Ark. And they brought those 6 out, and we went through the 6 boxes. And in the 6th box, Hugh found what he thought I was describing. He found that. We took that back up to Cumbria, fitted it, and it proved it would work. And then we restored it, and it now works perfectly. But even when we got it testing, it wasn't until we could put it underneath the clock mechanism and start lifting 2.5 tons of cast iron 175 feet up in the air that we knew we'd got it right. And it took a lot of settling in and again learning how this machine worked. But now it works really, really well. And that was the hardest thing in the whole project to do. And
that must have been stressful. You must have had moments
that was the time. That was the time when you're sitting there kind of going, deep down, you're kind of going, what have you done, Keith? What have you done? And you can't, your wife Lynn wakes up in the morning saying, oh, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah,
I'm fine. Not knowing that you'd be asleep.
You would definitely be famous overnight, Keith, if something had gone wrong there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, that's so that was the hardest part. And then I think it's the responsibility of getting everything up and working. If I using Fairford as an example, but if I went and repaired Fairford church clock and put it in the tower and it stopped 5 times whilst we were testing it, nobody would bat an eyelid.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, you'd just say, understood, it's an old machine that you've restored and you've got to make sure it works properly. We understand, blah, blah, blah. We had to get that across to Parliament that this is an old machine, it's being restored, and there is a chance that it could stop. And it was like, The computer says no.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. This is Big Ben. This doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen. And I think that's when it got stressful. When we got the mechanism in and up, we then had my drive unit from 2007 driving out to the dials, but we just tested the movement on its own. We got that bit working. And whilst we were doing that, we connected all the hammers, put all the hammers back on, which was a massive job putting the hammers back on. The hammerhead for Big Ben weighs half a ton. Just so you know,
Wowzers.
That's a big hammerhead.
Incredible.
So you got all these on, and you connect them back to the clock, and you say, "I want," you can't have those bells just testing, because they don't want that. They don't want it ringing. So I had to set them so they would be lifted and dropped, but not quite hit the bell. So you just got these massive thumps going on through the tower. So we then tested it for a month with these things going thump, 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 thump. And then came the moment where I said, I'm happy with the clock. I'll connect the mechanism up to the dials. We did that, started driving the dials from the original mechanical movement. And then we said, right, well, we'll just lower the hammers that little bit and start it chiming. And that's what we did.
Your heart must have been in your mouth, honestly. Those first chimes.
Yeah, I think it was all of us. I mean, it's, the whole company, Ian, Hugh and Alex of the Palace Clock team. It was a big moment. Those were big weeks, having that clock ring out again, because everybody knew it was working. It was big news. Big Ben's back, Everybody's listening to the chimes. They hadn't heard them for like 5 years. That was a bit. The amount of pride you felt, though, was fantastic.
Oh, it's incredible. So that's what I was going to ask you. What was the duration from start to finish?
About 5 years, yeah.
5 years.
But you had COVID in the middle of it.
I see. The world stopped anyway.
The world stopped. And that was a whole experience working there when Parliament Square had nobody in it.
Oh, yeah. That must have been, it must have been strange.
But I mean, and an aside, as part of discussing what we did there, we obviously, whilst we were putting the clock mechanism back in, the Queen died. And so Big Ben is used to toll the Queen. And so we had to be up in the tower when she moved from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey. And so we had to toll the bell every minute with a gun firing, from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Palace, where we were, with a gun firing every minute. And then as soon as she came in through the gate to lay in rest, we stopped. 4 days later, she was tolled 74 times by the Great Clock in Westminster Cathedral as she left the Palace of Westminster to go to Westminster. And we were up in the tower when that happened. It's the only time I've known London to be silent. There's nothing flying in the air. There's no police sirens. There's no ambulance sirens. London was quiet. And the pipes and the drums started. And it was just the most surreal thing to watch her coffin being pulled out of the palace. And then when after the service, we tolled the bell every minute all the way to Wellington Gate, when she was whisked off to go to Windsor. And that whole thing of working with the signals regiment who were working with, because we had to, the bang and the bong had to go at the same time. And that was, that was the tolling unit that we made for, that we, again, that had to do that job because Big Ben wasn't ready.
Of course.
So that was also very kind of like, don't break down on me now, girl.
Yeah. Oh, Keith, this is incredible.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
And did this get documented at all, as in by a film crew, or was any of this?
No, it's a very private thing, that, I think, and so it should be. I mean, the people like me and everybody else involved in it should be, it's that thing. I mean, Mark was downstairs pressing the trigger to fire it with a big digital clock next to the captain who was talking to the gun in Green Park. I was
Yeah.
up by the bell with Ian and Hugh and everybody from the clock team. Should anything go wrong, we had a rope on the hammer, so we could then start to do it. 3 or 4 men pulling on the end of it, we could get it done. And there was just this whole thing of not wanting it to fail. It was a massive thing.
Yeah, and how about the other works? Was that documented at all? But did the film crew come in and
Channel 4 did it? I mean, we don't appear in much of that because the whole process of us being involved had to be kept quiet. Nobody knew that the clock mechanism was in Cumbria.
Of course. Yeah.
So all this
think.
restoration and conservation work was done in quiet, in secret, and it was brilliant because the village of Dakin knew we had it, but they were so proud it was there that if there was a strange vehicle going down the track to our workshops, we'd get the registration number the next day. Keith, there was this car down there. Didn't look. It was almost like it wasn't quite as bad as Dad's Army with people hiding in.
Yeah. But don't panic! Don't panic!
We had the going train on test in our test room, so it's a 15-foot pendulum swinging away. And one day I'm walking towards the test room, and there's a window and there's a footpath going past, and there's this about 4 people looking through the window. And they said, "Oh," I said, "Can I help you?" They said, "Yeah." They said, "We've been told that if we look through this window, we can see the pendulum of Big Ben swinging." I said, "Don't be silly." I said, "That's Manchester Town Hall." They said, "Oh, of course. What would Big Ben be doing all the way up here?"
Wonderful.
And then they slowly headed off.
Yeah. But then your nose just went and started growing. Oh, I love that. Oh, that's wonderful.
So
What?
I mean, that was the story, really.
This is just an incredible story. It's an incredible story, and you must, I don't know if you're like this too. I'm not sure, but do you, you've got to give yourself a pat on the back.
I will give the company a pat on the back. It's a whole.
Yeah, of course. That's what I mean.
I'm proud of everybody who was involved in it, and I happen to be, the director who led that whole charge, but
yes,
I couldn't have done it on my own.
No, I know.
I had to have a team that I trusted. I had to have everybody else around us. I was willing to take the responsibility to do it, and I'm very pleased I did that, and we got it across the line. We still look after it. We go once a month to service parts of it, and that's working really, really well. I'm incredibly chuffed with everybody who my team who worked on it and the part of it, and we're well known for it. You go on our website, you can see there's a section on the auto winder, and there's a video. If you want to go and watch that wonderful machine work, there's a video on our website in the special project section of it working.
Lovely.
You should go and see that. And it's great. I managed to lecture around the world. I've been to Australia, America twice, all over the place, lecturing on Big Ben. So it's paid me back, and I'm very proud of that fact.
Oh, I think it's such an achievement, and absolutely, you should be proud of yourself and your team for doing something. For that it's enormous. It's just such an incredible achievement, and it's not for the faint-hearted. I know that you have a lot of experience, but there's not many people that would say, "Yep, we can do that." I mean, it's just that's quite astonishing.
But I'd say it goes back to that conversation I had as a young 20-year-old with my father saying, oh, that if somebody else did it, then why can't you?
Yeah,
Dense men put that clock up in that clock tower and got it running
exactly.
160 odd years ago. So flipping heck, if we can't do it in 2024, then what
I know. Amazing though, isn't it? What you learn, but what you learn about yourself when you take on these challenges. I said this to Peter, who was a guest on the podcast yesterday, and I just said that we don't reach nobody reaches their full potential. Everybody just keeps it in the bag, and you don't, and there's so much more that you can give. There is so much more that one can give, and you just have to step forward.
Yeah,
You know,
I think that is very true. I think you do have to give. And I mean, if I turn that question around on you in a way, when you finish a big project, when you finish that big project, you've done it, and you step back, that feeling is very personal, and I don't
yeah,
think you can put it into words.
no,
It's like winning a cup in rugby. Sometimes you win that cup, you go through the whole game or whatever, and you look at that cup, and that feeling is very, very personal.
yes,
And
yeah,
I kind of think that is such a privilege to be in a position where you get that feeling. And I've never been able to describe that feeling. Some people say it's almost disappointment. It's not disappointment. It's inner reflection. And I'm struggling now. I'm looking at you. I know you're thinking about it. How do you describe that feeling? It's not
and
like
also.
it's not that, is it?
It's not. It's absolutely not. And I think for me, so when I first finished my first major project at Kensington Palace, you think that you'd be popping the champagne and yeah, this is
Yeah,
fantastic. You're not. You're absolutely exhausted. You're you're
yeah.
you're just you're pleased it's gone well. You're hoping that the clients are happy, and there's all this type of thing. Oh, I could have done that a little bit better, and blah, 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 and this is what you're going through. So you can't immediately just celebrate and be pleased with yourself. It takes a few years. It's down the line that you look back and you say, you know what, we did a really good job there. I'm really proud
Couldn't
of
agree.
that.
Could
It
not
come it
agree
come
more.
yeah, it comes out very, very slowly in incremental parts, and it rewards you the more time goes on, I believe.
Yeah, and in another project we did was we made the hammer that fitted in the 22-ton bell which started the Olympic Games in London.
Oh
Right,
God.
designed this big hammer. You know, Bradley Wiggins has a rope he pulls. There's people. We did it with pneumatics, and you're sitting there at home watching that, thinking, "Please work."
I'm glad I didn't know you before you told me this. Honestly, I wouldn't have been able to watch it. I'd have been so nervous for you.
I had consumed a large amount of wine before that part started.
Yeah, of course, of course.
But
That's incredible.
but what I'm saying is that it's those feelings. You can't explain those feelings. I have never been able
No,
to find the words to
no.
explain. I think that's the interesting thing.
Oh, I think it's incredible. It's this is such an incredible story, and I mean, there's definitely a book. Um,
I don't think so.
there's got to be some sort of now it's done, some sort of documentary looking back at it because you've got photographs and you'll probably have some videos and things like
Yeah,
that. I
yeah.
mean, it would be fascinating. It would be
And it's a load of
fascinating.
fun. It's a load of fun because
Yeah.
you're working up there. You'll be, you always have games and just working with the team, having fun, and then actually delivering is just brilliant.
Mm. Wonderful. We're sort of coming towards the end of this, Keith. I've just got a couple of things to ask you, and it's what is the state of your industry, and are there young people coming into it? I know you've got quite a young team, which is very, very very good. But is what's it like now compared to when you first started? Is there the interest? Is there the you know the has the culture changed? Has the mindset for youngsters sort of slightly changed? And we touched a little bit on, you're on my day and as an apprentice, it was a lot tougher than it is now. I can tell you.
Yeah,
And
very much
I
so.
think that I prefer to be like that. That was healthy. For me personally, not for everybody, but for me personally, I quite liked that. It was the hardship because it tested you.
It
So
was going from being a boy to working in a grown up environment.
yes,
That's what it taught you.
yeah.
Those are all really interesting questions. We're very lucky. We have Westdean College down on the south coast, which has a horology course. We have the course still running at BCU, which is the course, which is the same college I went to, which my youngest son went to. Both my sons are in the business, William and Callum. So there are horologists coming through.
Right.
We do a lot of internships from those colleges. So we say to any student at Birmingham, I ask them to write to me in the second year saying why I should pay for them to come and be at the Cumbria Clock Company for a week. I'm going to make that 2 weeks. I'll pay for all your expenses, your accommodation, and everything. And you can come and learn, have 2 weeks for me. And we get somebody every year to that. We have
Right.
a couple from Westdean who come along, several. We could end up with 5 or 6 coming from Westdean. We have a connection with a school of clockmaking in Paris, so we get an intern from Paris. This year we had the lovely Edith. She was fantastic. She came for a month. And we've just made a connection with the Dutch School of Horology in Schoonhaven, who are sending a young clockmaker next year who's going to come to us for 3 months, young Is, who's going to kind of expand his knowledge into what we do. So I'm really, really keen. I do everything I can to give young people an opportunity. I don't flower it up. I expect them to work.
Yeah.
I don't say you've got a whole day to get your cotton wool buds out and kind of clean this bit. You've got to clean it. This is the commercial world of conservation, and there's a
Yes.
huge difference. I don't need to preach to you about that. I think one of the biggest problems we have is we no longer teach hand skills in schools. So we don't have woodwork, metalwork, and technical drawing in our curriculum, and I think that is a big miss. I think it's a huge miss because people
Yeah.
don't have an opportunity until they're 18 years old to use these.
No.
There's not model clubs anymore. There's not model engineering clubs. There's not anything like that. So I think that's the biggest problem we've got. We somehow, in a way, in the same way with how arts and crafts start, William Morris, it was about
Yeah.
reteaching skills.
Yep.
This is nothing new. We're just ending up in the same place that we were a long time ago. So I think horology is in a good place. I think horology, but is with what we do with interns, is in a good shape. But we've got to make sure that it stays there. And this is what I said to you earlier: was the biggest mistake we can make is lose those skills. And
Yep.
so we have to pressurize people. We have to make sure that people are aware of the importance of these, and it means people like yourself and me and many other people in conservation at the where we're being recognized for what we've done, make it clear that there is a route for young people to come in like we had. And I think
Yes.
that that's our bit of paying back into the karma machine of conservation.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's one of the reasons why I do these podcasts, a big reason why I
Exactly.
do these podcasts.
Yes.
So youngsters can listen to this and really get an insight to what we do, and just to make them interested, and it can go out to hundreds of people. So I think Yeah, you're right. It's interesting. I think that I do question whether the um, youngsters are a slightly different breed now. I do. I'm not saying that, it's obviously on an individual basis, definitely. But as a whole, I wonder how many would be putting up for what I put up with in my workshop experience as an apprentice in Brighton. And it was, you had to be pretty tough to put up with a lot of the stuff.
I
But
think they still are. I think they still are, Vincent. It's just they're different from us, and we.
Okay, that's
And
good to know.
yeah, I think they're different from us, and we've got to understand that they're different from us. You were taught, or I was taught, by men who had been in the war. They had
Yes.
a completely different view of life to
Yeah.
what we have. You're
Yeah.
not the same as the person who taught you,
No. No.
so
No. No.
they're not the same as us. And
Yeah, you're right.
we've got to find a way of teaching them
Yeah.
and looking at the way they are. I've actually kind of, once you get that in your head, then I think that they're exactly the same as us. The only
Ah, that's
they
really
don't have
good.
they don't have the opportunities that we had because they didn't have those hand skills at school.
No.
If they had
No,
those hand
exactly.
skills at school, they would be as good as us.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
as I said, when I was 16 and went to Birmingham Poly, 17, went to Birmingham Poly, I could use every machine in the machine shop. When people go to Birmingham and West Dean now, they've never switched on a lathe at the age
No.
of 18. So the
Yes.
first part is learning how to use the machines. That's
Mm.
that's why they might appear at first to be less capable than we were at that age. You can look at that on a building site. Look at when to earn extra money, I used to work on building sites. You were thrown into the deep end in a building site, mixing concrete, stuff like that, carrying 100-weight bags of cement, and it was dangerous and it was unnecessary. Now the building sites are much safer places, but it's longer to learn.
Yes.
I
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of think it's our responsibility, my responsibility, to find a way to be learn the skills to teach the next generation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And it's a really interesting topic, isn't it? We could have a discussion about this completely separately, and it really is fascinating. We've got to find a way because we have to look after Big Ben. We have to look after Kensington Palace in 50 years'
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a way. But yeah, it's been great. It's been so fascinating. This has been just amazing.
Yeah,
I,
it's been
I
very
really
enjoyable, very enjoyable, Vincent. I've had a
no.
great time.
I know it's,
We'll have to
it's
catch up for a
wonderful.
beer sometime. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we say goodbye, where can people find out more about you? Are you on, do you do your socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, or?
Yeah, I'm a big Instagrammer. I Cumbria Clock Co on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, and we're on Facebook. Those are
All
my
right.
and so yeah, I enjoy putting stuff on all of those, and kind of showing people the type of work we do and the interesting escapements. We had one having 4.1 million views the other day, which was quite incredible.
That's amazing. I'll put all the links and everything
Thank you very much.
in the show notes. Keith, thank you so much. I can see another possible episode of coming on in the future.
I'd love to.
I'd love to, yeah, I'd love to get you back on, and it's just been such a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Vincent. I've had a great time. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, bye bye for now.
Cheers.